I smell a rat, Simon. There's something more rotten in the state of Alpine, isn't it?
Last thing I saw when I was in the Miami paddock was him leaving and being followed, chased out of the paddock.
The Renault versus Enstone dynamic has been dysfunctional, or at least there's been that strange tension for as long as we all can remember.
How do you do that? You're currently on Sky Sports News, and yet here you are on the F1 Show podcast at the same time. Hello all, welcome to this hastily convened F1 show brought to you by Audi, and it's to do with the situation at Alpine that we touched on yesterday, which has moved on apace since the time we recorded it, in the last 24 hours, in fact. Shortly after we finished recording yesterday, and I'll bring in my guests very shortly, Alpine released the following statement that Alpine Formula One team announces that Ollie Oakes has resigned from his role as team principal. The team has accepted his resignation with immediate effect. As of today, Flavio Briatore will continue as executive advisor and will also be covering the duties previously performed by Ollie Oakes. The team would like to thank Ollie for his efforts since he joined last summer and his contribution in helping the team secure sixth place in the 2024 Constructors' Championship. The team will not be making any further comment. Now, as of this morning, and where are we now? We are Wednesday, the 7th of May. This was early today. As part of an ongoing assessment of its driver lineup, the team has made the decision to rotate one of its race seats for the next 5 rounds of the 2025 FIA Formula One World Championship. It therefore announces that Franco Colapinto, surprise, surprise, will be paired with Pierre Gasly from the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix ahead of a new evaluation before the British Grand Prix in July. Jack Doohan remains an integral part of the team and will be the first choice reserve driver for this period of time. Franco, who was one of the team's test and reserve drivers, will race with the number 43 and will partner Pierre for the first time in Imola ahead of 3 races in 3 weekends in Europe, which covers Monaco, Spain, before 2 races in June for Canada and Austria. Jack Doohan's reaction, just as a by-the-by on this statement, obviously Franco Colapinto and Flavio Briatore have had their days to say, "I'm very proud to have achieved my lifelong ambition to be a professional Formula One driver. I'll forever be grateful to the team for helping me achieve this dream. Obviously, the latest chapter is a tough one for me to take because as a driver, naturally, I want to be racing. That said, I appreciate the team's trust and commitment. We have long-term goals as a team to achieve, and I'll continue to give my maximum efforts in any way I can to help achieve those. For now, I'll keep my head down, keep working hard, watch with interest the next 5 races, and keep chasing my own personal goals." Karun Chandhok is here and always has his ear to the ground, but so too does our regular news hound. He's not working in a call centre, but he's got the headphones on. He's in Sky Sport News.
Any offers I make today are once only and are not available on price comparison websites. Just want to make that point.
Fair enough. Craig, obviously you've been following this for the last 24 hours. Tell us what you know.
Well, I know that Jack Doohan was told on Sunday, informed that he would be out of the race seat for Imola. It's been bubbling under this story since the start of the season. I mean, was it January that Colapinto was hired by Alpine, bought out of his contract at Williams, and what I'm learning is that the financial compulsions and all of this have played a big part in him being swapped in for Doohan. The type of cash that Alpine can get is pretty significant. They did pay a fee to Williams to get Colapinto on this 5-year loan deal, I think we believe, and therefore there's an onus to recoup the money. The fact that it's just for 5 races is an unusual thing, and I think the expectation is if he does okay, he'll be there for the rest of the year. I'm being guided that as far as the team are concerned, this isn't a season where they're going to be tearing up trees. They think they can do very well in 2026 with the supply of Mercedes engines, and therefore they're using these races to assess their driver pool, which means they've had a look at Jack Doohan. It's not out the question, apparently. It'd be, I think, pretty far-fetched if he were to come back in the car. There's also Paul Aron and there's Colapinto. And Aron and Colapinto have had 4 tests this season in 2023 equipment, so that they've been able to look at both of their capabilities and fitness for the job potentially next year. Let's see how Colapinto does. And yes, they have to run him in the car if they're going to get the money. So at the end of the day, it was something of an inevitability that this was going to happen. We thought it would either happen in Miami or Imola, and it's happened in Imola.
Let's come back to the drivers, because obviously there's quite a lot of layers to this story when you look at it. And maybe let's get into Ollie Oakes and his resignation. We mentioned on the podcast yesterday, last thing I saw when I was in the Miami paddock was him leaving and being followed, chased out of the paddock as he raced for the plane, clearly with this news, by the Netflix cameras for Drive to Survive. So it looked like something was untoward. There was some shots, weren't there, of him deep in conversation with Flavio in the paddock. We can only assume that was to do with this and his imminent resignation. What we know of Ollie Oakes, and I know you know him, Karun, he was a 37-year-old, so he was like the youngest team principal that we've seen. He's been in position since Spain of last year, and quite a pedigree himself. 2005 World Karting Champion, double British Karting Champion, and set up High Tech Grand Prix in 2015. Remains the owner of that. Obviously, Mazepan came in and was part owner for it. But they've currently got entrants in F2, F3, Asian F3, F1 Academy as well. So I presume that he'll just return to a role with them. But we understand behind the scenes that he was actually a big fan of Jack Doohan. How much do you think that his support of Jack, perhaps over Franco Colapinto, might have precipitated his resignation here?
I smell a rat, Simon. I think there's something more rotten in the state of Alpine, isn't it? He hasn't quit based on just a driver decision here.
Right.
He's not quit the chance to be one of the 10, going to be 11 team principals at the top of the sport based on who's going to be the second seat. And really, in terms of ability, between Doohan and Colapinto, there's not much to choose, I think, between them. They're sort of same for same. So for me, there's something more going on here that hasn't yet come out in the wash. I haven't had a chance to talk to Ollie. As you say, I've known him for a little while, but I thought it's a bit unfair to be trying to chase him in a day where it's all unfolding. So, but I suspect there's something more going on behind the scenes that's not yet unfolded. We know Ollie, for example, was bringing in a load of his trusted lieutenants from high tech, people like Dave Greenwood and some of the other engineers he was bringing into the race team. There's been a bit of a brain drain at Enstone. I think I heard last night that, they've lost another 5 people to Cadillac from the race team. So, across the board from mechanics and things like that. So, they're a team that's had 7 team bosses. Craig, you can correct me. I think it's 7 team bosses since 2020. 7 bosses in 5 years. I mean, that doesn't exactly scream stability, does it?
No, yeah, but that's the other layer. Again, I can go through them. Luca De Meyer presided over the loss of Cyril Abiteboul, Martin Bukowski, Alain Prost. He was an advisor, obviously. Laurent Rossi, Otmar Safnauer, Bruno Famin, Pat Fry, Matt Harmon, and Alan Payne from the engineering side. On top of that, the engine's been 20 bhp down. They were overweight on the car last year, and they could have probably have kept Alonso and Piastri. So that's just as a by the by. But just to come back to you on Ollie Oakes, cited personal reasons. What do you know about him leaving, Craig? Is there anything you can add to what Craig was saying?
Yes, there's no reasons given for Ollie Oakes' departure. And the guidance I've received back is that they, just as Karun says, no one is backing up the idea that it's because he objected to Colapinto being swapped in for Doohan. When I've suggested, is it because he felt his own role was undermined by Flavio Briatore taking the big decisions? It's been explained to me that no, actually, I think Oliver Oakes was relatively comfortable running the factory and the racing side of the operation while Briatore handled the big political stuff. I think they wanted a model similar to McLaren's, where Andrea Stella ran the ship and steered the ship, and Zach Brown, in a sense, did the politicking. Now, there might be an element where Oakes feels perhaps Briatore is stepping into his terrain a little bit, but I agree with Karun here. All the indications I've been given is that his departure is not necessarily linked to the driver swap. It's maybe something else. Perhaps it's a convenient moment for him to step aside in the shadow of this. And I think it's only maybe weeks or months down the line that we'll actually get his side of the story. He is not available for comment at the moment. So I think it's something else, or has caused him to quit himself. I think it is his own decision to go, and yes, we'll have to learn that in the fullness of time. But yeah, will Flavio Briatore be a full-time hands-on team boss? Unlikely. I think you'll have to either find someone else to do the job that Ollie Oakes was doing. Maybe the likes of David Sanchez or Dave Greenwood can aid in that with all their experience. But yes, I don't think it's because Flavio wants to micromanage the team. I think they will have to replace Oakes.
Yeah, I mean, they've never won. The Esso team have never won a drivers or constructors without Flavio at the helm. They've won 3 constructors. They won 4 drivers titles, obviously a couple with Michael Schumacher in 94, 95, and 2005, 2006 with Fernando Alonso. But lest we forget, as much as he was part of the highlights, the zenith, if you like, of the Enstone team, he was also there for the Nadir back in 2000. Well, in response to 2008 and Crashgate at the Singapore Grand Prix, where Nelson Piquet Jr. was instructed to crash to benefit Fernando Alonso, for which, and I think Craig's just got to leave us for the moment because he is going live onto Sky Sports News. But I'll continue with Karun if we could on that front. Lest we forget, as we said, that he was part of that. He was given by the FIA lifetime ban, which was overturned by a French court. And now we find ourselves here, how many years later? 16 years later, am I right in saying that? 2009, I think, was the ban. So, yeah, roughly 16 years later, and he's back in charge as team principal at Enstone again at the age of 75. Yeah, as Craig's pointing out, he's not going to be wanting to do the day-to-day legwork. Who's going to do that, Karun?
They're going to have to recruit, aren't they? I mean, whether that is an internal promotion or someone from the outside, there's no way Flav's going to be doing the day-to-day mundane stuff of, let's look at the payroll, and it's just running the team on a day-to-day basis. So, yeah, I mean, whether the driver decision was just the final straw for Ollie, maybe, but to me, there's, running an F1 team is a 24/7 thing, and we know Flavio's got several different business interests, and things like managing Fernando Alonso and running his restaurants and hotels and nightclubs and all this sort of stuff. So, yeah, I can't see him, running this by himself. So we're heading for team boss number 8, aren't we, basically? Who that is, time will tell. But I think it's a really funny time for that team because on one hand, there's clearly, as Craig highlighted, a lot of commercial considerations for taking this decision behind Colapinto. But, you're talking about a team that's got these high-profile Hollywood and golfing superstars who are investors, and there's supposedly, pots of money pouring in to them from everywhere else. So did they have to make a decision purely based on commercial reasons? I'm not sure. So it all seems just a bit... there's just, as you say, I think the word layers is correct. There's a lot of layers here, and we're not yet getting beyond just the top part of the onion. I feel it's going to unfold over the next few weeks.
It is. I mean, as you mentioned, it probably goes all the way up. This, doesn't it, to Luca De Meo as the CEO of the Renault Group, because he is the man at the very top level that has presided over all of those senior management changes and all of the brain drain, as you said, that's happening at Enstone. As it's a breaking story, we're going to take a quick break whilst Craig continues on Sky Sports News, and then we'll return and discuss the driver ramifications in a couple of moments' time. Quick word on our show partner, Audi. The philosophy of Audi Sport isn't just about winning races. It's about pushing boundaries. Everything learnt on the track goes straight into Audi's road cars, making them just as thrilling as they are refined. Take the Audi RS range, serious performance, but with a level of sophistication and refinement that doesn't need to be loud to make a statement. It's that perfect blend of power and precision wrapped in quiet luxury. Whether it's their powerful style or the RS Sport suspension with Quattro all-wheel drive for razor-sharp handling, Audi is constantly redefining the future of performance. Book a test drive today to experience the Audi RS range for yourself. Welcome back to the F1 show, sponsored by Audi. You're currently on Sky Sports News, and yet here you are on the F1 show podcast at the same time.
Amazing. And on mute.
And on mute. Do you want to unmute it? Go for
Amazing. Only been 5 years since COVID, and you're still at it. You're muted.
Unmute. Unmute. No, you're still on mute.
Still on mute. I mean, you look the part in your call center headset, but
maybe there's some interference.
How about that? Apparently, I'm sorry about that, but apparently moving up and down switches you on and off.
Yes, welcome back to the F1 show, sponsored by Audi, including that wonderful bit there. We were talking actually, just as you went there, Craig, about, I suppose, this stretching up to the higher echelons of the Renault CEO, Luca De Meo. He's been in charge there of since 2020, and he's presided over all of these changes. Is this, do you think, a team in crisis?
I mean, it's the Renault versus Enstone dynamic has been dysfunctional, or at least there's been that strange tension for as long as we all can remember, surely. I mean, at the same time as we're talking about them maybe meddling and making too many changes, do we not also have to acknowledge some sensible moves have been made, not least taking the Mercedes engines for next year? That looks like a step forward. Can you really argue with them hiring Colapinto? Yes, it's not a massive upgrade, or maybe not an upgrade at all on Jack Doohan, but the commercial side to the deal kind of makes sense. I suppose you could look back and say that they messed up with Oscar Piastri, didn't they? That's who they really wanted in that car, alongside Pierre Gasly. They were smart enough to see how good he was in the junior ranks and all conquering at F3 and F2, but they got the deal wrong. They got that contract wrong, and Mark Webber very cleverly managed to negotiate the seat at McLaren for them. So there's a lot of change, but then I think that they've gone through periods when running an F1 team didn't make financial sense for the car company. And let's see how this plays out. Bringing Briatore back, at least. Yes, some people will be against it. I remember putting it to Flavio himself. What do you say to those that say you shouldn't be back in F1 after Crashgate and all that happened? Then he had a 2-word response, one of which I can't repeat. The other word was off. But he is. You speak to a lot of people who were at Enstone in that period, and they would have run through brick walls for Flavio Briatore. He has immense charisma, and he gets things done. He's old school F1 in that sense. You can't help thinking that Mercedes engine deal could put them in the top bracket or thereabouts next season. So let's see how they go. These are convulsions, but they might lead to a better, a more effective team at the end of the day.
Yeah, but I think there's a few things in there, Craig, isn't there? First of all, Briatore had that success because, let's not forget, he had Ross Brawn, Rory Byrne, and Michael Schumacher with it. When they left, they didn't win another. I think they won one race in the next 7 years once that trio had disappeared. Point B, when he had the Alonso success, he also had the likes of a Pat Simmons and an Alan Permain. There was some really good people around that. With the leads they've had recently, and I know David Sanchez is doing an excellent job, actually. I think that's the irony, is the car's actually good this year, much better than it was last year. But Flavio's a lot older than he was back then. And you look at the trend of team principals, the James Vowles, Laura Meckeys, and all. There's a lot of young blood, Andrea Stella, that's come in to the sport, and they're the ones delivering the success. So I don't know. I think to me, I actually rewind back to our friend David Croft in Melbourne 2019, I believe, where we sat down and he went, "What is the point of Renault in F1?" And that's what it comes back to. What are they trying to achieve? Because they're not a works team anymore. They're trying to brand build, I guess, for Alpine, but it's not a high volume car. They're not. It's the numbers versus the justification is hard to make. It's are they just playing the valuation game? In which case, well, sell up now, because they bought it for £1, didn't they? And was it back in 2016 from Genai Capital? If they're playing the valuation game, then why not sell it? Guess what? To High Tech, who were desperate to have an entry into F1. So that's what I mean. There's a lot of things in this whole thing that just don't add up to me. Still, I don't get the overall strategy here.
I suppose Alfa Romeo badged the Sauber, didn't they? And Ford aren't really building the engine for Red Bull. I mean, they'll have an input on it, but maybe these slightly more complicated arrangements with automotive manufacturers are going to be a bit more normal. I mean, it's the I suppose the key, what's changed, I suppose, Karun, is that instead of hemorrhaging money, you can now have an F1 team tick along, can't you? It kind of makes a profit. So they don't need to sell it. It's a marketing tool of sorts, and they still use the Alpine drivers, don't they, to make commercials for their cars, and so while you're right, it's not the traditional platform that a car maker exploits. It's kind of, they've lucked into a useful scenario where it doesn't cost them money, and they can kind of keep it going, and that's probably why it's fallen into this sort of halfway house where they've got 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and it all looks a bit messy.
They'll sell a lot of cars in Argentina now, I guess, won't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
That's true. I mean, the rising tide lifts all boats, doesn't it? So there were the rumours that Flav was brought in just to get it ready to sell, but actually, right now, as you're saying, you got the F1 film coming out in the summer, and it still seems to be on that upward trajectory, and that's going to no doubt help it along the way. On the subject, though, of the drivers, you touched on it there. When we went to Brazil last year at the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, the amount of Argentinians that had come across simply to see Franco Colapinto. Yes, he crashed under the safety car in those treacherous conditions, those horrendous conditions, in that amazing race. Max came through, and it looked to me like, wow, this is the start of something huge. And the Argentinian Grand Prix, having not been on the rota for a while, would be a pretty nice prospect. I think we'd all enjoy going to Buenos Aires. But he did have 3 retirements. I think his best place was 8th in Azerbaijan. He had a 10th in Austin, so he picked up 5 points. But his crash bill was still big. But he comes with these backers, Mercado Libre, the Argentine e-commerce giant, Globant are a tech company. We understand YPF as well. There might be some money coming from the Argentinian state-sponsored oil company. They even had Uber, didn't they, on the car. But when you look at Jack and what he's done as well, as you said, just going back to it, where now for Jack Doohan? Because those 2 first lap DNFs, one at his home race in Australia, one, of course, through no fault of his own. He said, I didn't know. His last words for Alpine, I didn't know. What am I supposed to do when he was tagged and crashed? Do we think it's going to be difficult for him watching on and seeing, as a reserve driver, he's continuing that, Franco Colapinto in that seat? Do you think we might see him elsewhere, as it seems just so utterly harsh on him?
I think it's going to be tough for him to land a seat somewhere else, to be honest. He came into that Alpine seat really because they lost Ocon. I think they didn't really have any other established drivers. I suppose Bottas was sort of loosely in contention, but they decided to promote from within because they are in a rebuilding period, right? As Craig said before, we're building towards 26 with the Mercedes deal, etc. So they decided to go promote from within. I don't think Jack was on the radar of any other team, before that. So I can't see if that is something that's going to change going forward. And the thing is, with Cadillac coming in, there's obviously a lot of rumblings about the driver market, but I'm not hearing Jack being at the top of anyone's list. So really, I think his best option really is if Colapinto struggles and they go off and give Jack a bunch of testing and give him a chance to improve a bit more. And who knows whether he comes back or whether, because it is odd, Craig, isn't it? There's 5-race deal. I mean, to publicly announce a 5-race deal, that's quite something. I mean, that's not exactly a vote of confidence to the driver, is it?
Is that because they're waiting to see if the Argentine money turns up?
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah, it has to be. I mean, it's the other. I think Jack Doohan is just, you have to say, give him credit for the way he has dealt publicly with being in this situation from the start of the year. And it was the team's fault that in signing Colapinto that inevitably faced questions about how long he'd be in that drive for. Wasn't it painful that the events of Suzuka and that moment not activating the DRS and I did ask the question, did you have a conversation with the team when you tried that tactic in the simulator? Did anyone advise you that it was only going to end one way if you did it for real on track? He said, I can't talk about that. And I think even there, he kind of took one for the team. He by and large has refused to criticize the team. You would forgive him today if we're saying, I haven't had enough of a chance. This isn't fair. I've shown reasonable pace. I'm just coming off out qualifying Pierre Gasly. Yes, I think, and it's precisely because, as Karun says, his one opportunity, I think, is to take this on the chin, show his determination behind the scenes at Alpine, and maybe hope that Colapinto begins to crash again, as I believe Karun, he has a couple of times. I mean, I don't know how serious they were, but even in these 4 outings he's had testing the 2023 car, there have been incidents there.
Yeah, that's right. I was given to understand that
at Monza, I think
they tested Qatar and Monza, and I think he had a shunt or an off in those as well. And as you say, Williams. Look, I think Colapinto is a good driver. But we only saw a small snapshot of it, and really, it's hard to judge in that small window. I think he's a good driver. There's obviously a lot of hype that came out of South America behind him, hailing him as the next world champion. I think, and I said it last year as well, it would have been a wrong thing for him to be promoted to the Red Bull seat. There was a rumor around that for a while. I thought that would have been way too early, and I stand by it. I think he's, we'll see, right? We'll see how he gets on. But there's no doubt about the crash damage, Bill, that he caused at Williams was not small. And the one in Vegas in particular, I think Williams were quite annoyed about that. Brazil was tricky because of conditions, but Vegas, there was an awful lot of damage he caused there.
Just a final one to pick up on what we've seen this year with Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson. Patience, it seems, is in short supply for some of these teams. I wonder how much that is due to everybody getting prepared for 2026 and potentially having the right people in the right place for the new set of regulations. They feel, okay, this is a year where we can experiment, and therefore we're going to, and it's not costing us everything. We might as well just assess our options, as it seems is happening in the Red Bull Young Driver program, and is now the want of Flavio, who's very experienced in these things. And, in the past, can't deny his successes. Maybe he is just looking at what the best options are for the team when we get into the new set of regulations. What do you think to that, Karun?
I mean, I think that's a good point. They all want to have some form of stability for at least the second half of this year going into next year. I think that's a very valid point. But you've also got to give these drivers a chance. I think, for example, you've touched on the Red Bull thing. The right thing, I think, would have been to have had Liam and Yuki at the young driver team, at Racing Bulls, and Hadjar doing 10,000 kilometers of testing, just allowing them to develop in the right way, and that's where Mercedes have just done a phenomenal job with Antonelli. and it's now playing out as we saw in Miami. You know, Doohan had a good solid test program. You know, you would hope that Paul Aaron and similarly for Colapinto, you know, you want to give they need to be out there driving and learning and developing. And I think 4 or 5 races is a very short time to judge these drivers. You know, under the way the format is with sprint race weekends and not enough practice and all that sort of stuff, you got to give these drivers either you give them a load of testing, or you got to give them a bit of time to develop. And yeah, I think whoever comes in next to take over Alpine on a day-to-day basis under Flavio, I think we'll have to keep an eye on that. I mean, the funny thing in all of this, of course, is that Jack Doohan was sort of managed by Flavio, because he had Bruno and Matteo Michel in his corner who will work with the Flavio Briatore management structure. So there, as you said, Simon, another layer of this very dysfunctional onion that seems to be in Enstone.
Yeah, Craig, final word on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Colapinto, part of the reason he made people got interested. He just acclimatized very quickly, didn't he? He's a very self-confident character. You can see why Flavio Briatore likes him, just because he's extrovert. He doesn't shrink away from challenges like this, which maybe one or two who have come into F1, it's looked as if it's been a little bit too much for them too quickly. He needs to get on top of the crashing, but if he does, then he looks like he's got the right temperament to do something at this altitude. But let's see, 5 races. Paul Aaron, people are excited about as well. Will he get a chance before the end of the year? Maybe something will come of all this chaos, which will be positive for Alpine. But at the moment, it's yes, they need to settle down and put aside all this flux.
I'm sure he might get a chance if there's some Estonian money. Who knows? But am I being cynical? There we go. I mean, as you said, time will tell whether Flavio's got it right or whether he's got it wrong. But for the moment, thank you, Karun, and thank you as well to Craig, who's probably got to pop off again to another hit on Sky Sports News. But there we go. That is the situation at Alpine. No more Ollie Oakes. He is gone, having resigned for personal reasons, and in place of Jack Doohan, Franco Colapinto is in. That's your lot. We'll see you next week on the F1 show. Bye-bye.